So, for those of you Kiwi listeners out there, you probably won't be too ecstatically flabbergasted to hear that Fonterra is, in fact, the biggest company in New Zealand. It is the most important company in New Zealand. They're very, very important for the New Zealand economy. And without Fonterra, really, I just don't even think New Zealand would survive at all. They're so important that they are, in fact, responsible for 30% of global dairy exports, and they exceed revenue of $22 billion annually for the New Zealand economy. And that is a lot of money right there. I kind of just wanted to talk about this because my family are, most of my family do originate as farmers. My grandparents were farmers. My auntie and uncle and cousins and all that are currently farmers, dairy farmers. So I have grown up realising just how important farming is for New Zealand. If we didn't export dairy or, forestry or anything like that, then we would have nothing. We'd just go completely broke and, none of us would be able to survive. So I really just think people in New Zealand need to get better at just appreciating how important farming is for our economy, really. So in today's episode, we're basically just going to be exploring just the scale of Fonterra, and a lot of you will be definitely surprised by just the sheer scale of Fonterra.
Welcome to the world of Market Talk. Episodes are available on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Just looking into a bit of stats to do with Fonterra and just a bit of the origin story and the history of Fonterra Cooperative Group Limited. So Fonterra is a New Zealand multinational publicly traded dairy cooperative owned by New Zealand farmers. So as I said, the company is responsible for approximately 30% of the world's dairy exports. And 30%, I mean, for a country of only like 5 million people, 30% of the world's dairy exports, that is a lot right there. Like, what's that? Cheese, milk, that kind of thing. So basically, as I said before, Fonterra is in fact New Zealand's largest company, and it is the 6th largest dairy company in the world as of 2022, as well as the largest in the Southern Hemisphere. So yeah, very, very big company. I think you guys can just get the gist of it there. Fonterra was established in October of 2001 following the merger of the country's two largest dairy cooperatives, New Zealand Dairy Group and Kiwi Cooperative Dairies, which are both in the New Zealand Dairy Board. So the New Zealand Dairy Board, basically, they were disestablished in 2001 and they were first established in 1923. And basically, they were just sort of statutory board in control of the export of all New Zealand dairy products. And basically, the two main cooperative companies within the New Zealand Dairy Board were, as I just mentioned, the New Zealand Dairy Group and Kiwi Cooperative Dairies. So basically, in 2001, they all just merged together and formed this one cooperative group, which is Fonterra. So the name Fonterra comes from Latin fons de terra, meaning spring from the land. So there's a bit of a fun fact for you, fons de terra. So the first dairy cooperative in New Zealand was established in Otago in 1871, and by 1920 there were around 600 dairy processing factories, of which about 85% were owned by cooperatives. And in the 1930s, there were around 500 cooperatives, but after World War II, improved transportation, processing technologies and energy systems led to a trend of consolidation, where the cooperatives merged and became larger and fewer in number. And by the 1990s, there were only 4 cooperatives nationwide. The Waikato-based New Zealand Dairy Group, the Taranaki-based Kiwi Cooperative Dairies, Westland Milk Products, and the Teitua Cooperative Dairy Company. So yeah, basically the story is all of these cooperatives, all of these hundreds of dairy processing factories around New Zealand, all just sort of merged together. And by the 1990s, there were 4 main cooperatives nationwide. And then in 2001, basically all of these existing cooperatives just merged together, and it just formed the one main Fonterra that we see these days. And basically, in today's time, the core business consists of exporting dairy products under the NZMP brand, and 95% of the Fonterra New Zealand production is exported. So only 5% of what Fonterra actually produces stays in New Zealand. But yeah, so 95% of it is sold internationally under the NZMP brand. Fonterra also operates a fast-moving consumer goods business for dairy products, which is, of course, Fonterra Brands. And some of the Fonterra brands include, we've got Anchor, obviously, Farm Source, Fresh and Fruity, Mammoth, Mainland, Carpety, just that kind of thing. I think you guys get the deal. I think Primo is one of them. So those are just kind of the Fonterra brands within the New Zealand market. I'm pretty sure... So yeah, Fonterra did actually used to own Tip Top ice cream as well, but then in 2019 they sold it for $380 million to Froneri International Limited, which is a global ice cream manufacturer with its headquarters in Leeming Bar, North Yorkshire, England. So there you go. So it's pretty self-explanatory just how important Fonterra is to the New Zealand economy. They currently have 16,400 plus employees, and annually they collect 15 billion litres of milk per year. And they basically send out $10 to $11 billion to farmers annually. So that, that contributes a lot to the economy. And Fonterra is also just a very good thing for farmers, because rather than just having all of these individual little cooperatives all around the country, there's just this one main sort of body that's responsible for all of the dairy farming operations in New Zealand. So it basically just provides certainty and scale for farmers. And really, since its founding, Fonterra has paid $65 billion to farmers and shareholders nationwide. And it's also worth noting that one of New Zealand's most important dairy importers are China. So China accounts for most of the exports of dairy products out of New Zealand. And even the Chinese premier visited Fonterra in June of 2024. So honestly, you can just see how farming in general is so important for the New Zealand economy. If we didn't have any farmers, like I say, there's not going to be any economy at all. Like, what would we do, I suppose we would still have like kiwi fruit exporting and forestry and that kind of thing, but without dairy farming, the economy is just going to absolutely tank, because Fonterra processes about 80 to 85% of all raw milk in New Zealand, and without it, there would be no unrefined processing, logistics, or export channel for the vast majority of New Zealand dairy farms. And without Fonterra, most small and mid-sized farmers would struggle to find alternative buyers, which would lead to milk wastage, immediate income loss, and farm closures in rural areas. And not only would this shock the New Zealand economy, this would absolutely shock the global economy. Fonterra's exports account for 30% of the entire world's dairy imports. So if the entire world just lost 30% of all of its cheese and milk and all of that, then the price of dairy is just going to absolutely skyrocket, and it's also going to have a pretty bad effect on pretty much all of the other countries as well. So there you go. So without Fonterra, the New Zealand dollar would just depreciate extremely sharply. Export earnings would plummet by billions, like $20 billion annually. And without this cash flow from Fonterra, many rural towns would deteriorate with rising unemployment and depopulation. And because there's literally no other cooperative dairy company in New Zealand to the scale of Fonterra, it would take a lot of time to recover and get back up to the scale that we're at now. Because no other single New Zealand company or co-op would replace that global network in the short term. That's just not possible. And also, without cooperatives, farmers have to go back to competing against each other, because like how it is now with just one main cooperative company, is that people like farmers don't have to compete against each other because they're all like working for the same company, really. So if there were to be like various other smaller cooperatives or companies, operating these farms, then there would be a lot more competition, lower efficiency, higher costs, and weaker global competitiveness. And a very similar thing happened with Zespri. And obviously, for those of you who don't know what Zespri is, they're basically just the main exporters of kiwi fruit in New Zealand. And they're sort of the same thing. They're sort of like a co-op. But before Zespri was formed, basically all of these kiwi fruit farmers were all competing against each other, which obviously led to much lower prices. So that definitely didn't do too much good for the New Zealand economy, because pretty much all of the farmers were just exporting their kiwi fruit at the lowest cost, like possible cost. But then Zespri was formed, and basically all of the kiwi fruit farms around New Zealand all just merged together. So then they were able to raise their prices quite a bit. So there were much higher prices, and it did much better for the New Zealand economy. And there was just a lot more global competitiveness. So there was a very similar thing with Zespri, and I might do an entire video on Zespri in the future. But in terms of Fonterra, you can just see like how they're so important. I mean, New Zealand is a very, very different country in a way that most other developed countries in the world don't really focus mainly on farming like we do, because, as I say, farming is, of course, New Zealand's most important sector, and it contributes the most to our economy by far. But that's a very rare thing to happen in any country, really, for farming to be this important, because for most developed economies, like these countries would export machinery and technology and that kind of thing, but here we stick to our old dairy farming and forestry and that kind of thing, and it seems to be working. So we are a very, very different country in that regard, of our farming being such a important thing, because for most other countries out there that rely on their farming, they're all poor, they're not sort of compared to most other countries that rely on farming, New Zealand is actually quite wealthy. Because if we look at these top 15 milk exporters by dollar value as of 2023, New Zealand is by far the top exporter, and following New Zealand is Germany, then the Netherlands, then the United States. And those three other countries are very, very big countries. Like, they have a lot more people in them, but they produce a lot less dairy than New Zealand does. Germany only exports $3.5 billion worth of dairy products, whereas New Zealand exports $20 billion. So you can definitely see just how impactful New Zealand is on the whole dairy sector there. And basically the reasoning behind why New Zealand is so developed as a farming country compared to so many other countries out there is that we have quite the reputation of being a clean and green sort of a country, allowing us to export premium sort of food. Because obviously New Zealand does promote its sort of grass-free range and all that kind of clean and green stuff. So I think globally we're seen as more of a sort of premium sort of dairy exporters sort of thing. But basically now we're just going to have a quick word from the CEO of Fonterra, and this is only a recent sort of interview here from the Herald Now in May of this year. And basically he just explains why the price of butter is so much more expensive here in New Zealand than in comparison to other countries, which is a very weird thing, because obviously, as I've already said many times in this episode, New Zealand is one of the largest dairy exporters in the world, and yet butter is like so ridiculously expensive here compared to other countries. So we're going to have a bit of a word from the CEO of Fonterra about that, along with the free trade deal with India that happened recently with Fonterra. So let's just go ahead and take a quick peek at that.
Fonterra has announced its 9-month profit to the end of April was $1.08 billion, was up 11%. It's forecasting, and this is great off the back of last season, forecasting again $10 a kilo for milk solids for the next financial year, the next season. I sat down with the chief executive. Good morning, good to be with you.
Yeah, pleased to be here.
I sat down with the chief executive, Miles Hurrell. Miles, good morning, good to be with you.
Yeah, pleased to be here.
Put this into context for us. What does this mean for New Zealand?
Oh, sort of back of the envelope, $15 billion into the New Zealand economy, and of course, we could all do with that at the moment. Things are a bit rough here in New Zealand. I think we all know that, and so proud that the ag sector, dairy and Fonterra can do its part to hopefully sort of steer us in the right direction for the year ahead.
There's a lot of talk about the potential IPO or a trade sale of your consumer brands, and how's that progressing?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of work. I mean, that business, it's decades old, and it's been integrated into Fonterra for a number of years. So the separation it takes a lot of time to separate that business from the core. But going hard on both the trade sale, as you say, and the initial public offering. So we announced about a year ago that'd be a 12 to 18 month process. So we've just ticked over that first hurdle, and so the pressure's on us to keep moving, and things are okay at the moment.
And are you selling all of it or part of it, or?
So there's a couple of sort of areas that are ring fenced, but by and large, it's all our consumer brands businesses, plus an integrated business in Australia and integrated business in Sri Lanka, by and large. So we call it the consumer and associated businesses, but by and large, it's our consumer branded business.
You've mentioned today the uncertainty, the global uncertainty, Trump and his tariffs and all of that. How big of a worry is that for Fonterra?
Well, at a macro level, it is a worry. I think that when you consider that we're advocates for free trade here in New Zealand, and we need to see free flow of products across the world, that the world norms have changed. All those things are a concern when you think about the role that we play in the world that we play in. When you get down to sort of the granular level, the fact that we've all got a tariff put on us sort of puts us back on a level playing field. So not ideal, but we are living with it. And at the same time, there may be opportunities that come as a result of that. As some markets become more punitive on them versus us, it becomes an opportunity for us. But when you take it to the next highest level, it's not a good thing for anyone, and that's the stuff we need to watch.
You're a global company. Does it keep you up at night?
A little. There are things that probably keep me up ahead of that, because at the end of the day, there are things that you can control which keep me up a little bit more. Where those things are, to be fair, outside of our control. Our job's to try and navigate and be nimble at the same time. So. Yeah.
The government wants to double our exports within the next 10 years. And one of the ways they're trying to do that is this FTA with India. Do you expect that it would include dairy?
Well, the commentary that's come out of the Prime Minister and the Trade Minister in the last couple of months has been very positive. The fact that dairy is in the conversation, but we're also realists that these things, it's going to be a very, very tough conversation, and I suspect it's going to go on for some time. The request that we put into our government is that a comprehensive outcome is a heck of a lot better than a fast outcome. So if it needs to take a bit more time to get an outcome for what's good for all New Zealand, and we'd argue for the whole globe when it comes to international trade, let's take our time to get the right outcome. But we're realists at the same time.
Because that obviously doesn't suit Luxon's political timetable that he's promised voters. But does that? What would be the difference between dairy and included and not included for New Zealand?
Well, I mean, India is the largest consumer of dairy. At the same time, they're the largest producer of dairy. They're by and large self-sufficient at the moment, give or take. But as their population grows, their middle class grows, we've seen that play in China the last 10 or 20 years. There's no reason why you can't see that middle class in India really sort of get larger and stronger. And our argument is they're going to need probably imports to supplement the products that they have from their own markets. And of course, we're talking about the specialty proteins that we produce, the intellectual property that's gone into developing those. We're not talking commodities here. That's not our game. And so we believe there's an opportunity to support the local dairy and consumer markets in India. And so we believe there's an opportunity for us to work in that regard. But we'll see where it plays out.
Miles, there's huge opportunity. There's also a huge payout for farmers, which means great things for the New Zealand economy, and you do hear a lot in the press about the price of butter. What do you reckon when you hear that?
Yeah, look, and I get that, and I acknowledge that things are tough. The environment in New Zealand, which we said earlier on, I mean, it's not easy at the moment. The economic situation in New Zealand is not as bright as we'd all like it to be, and the cost of living is in front and centre of most families' minds. But the international market is playing a part here. So we're 8,500 farmers, give or take, Fonterra farmers, and so we're a collection of small families, ultimately small businesses in their own right. And the international market's going ahead leaps and bounds, and our job is to follow that and get the best returns we can.
And we all benefit from that international price through the investments that are made back into New Zealand's economy.
And we talked about the $15 billion that's going to go into the New Zealand economy. Part of that's on the back of the international butter price. Respectfully, the New Zealand element of that is very, very small. It's the international market that drives that in the New Zealand context. And so, that is a good news story. And farmers will go and spend in their local communities, and that'll hopefully flow on and make New Zealand more prosperous in the short to medium term.
How do you reckon Field Days is going to go this year?
Yeah, interesting. It's been a bit quiet the last couple of years, and so I think that the OCR cut again.
Yeah, I hope you guys
yesterday.
were absolutely informed and entertained by that riveting interview right there. And basically, I think that can wrap up this episode for today. This might have been a little bit of a shorter episode, but I mean, let's be real. No one's sticking around for all 40 minutes of the usual length of these episodes, so I'm going to try to shorten these down a bit from now on. And I just thought this was a bit of an interesting thing here because you don't really think about just how important farming is to the New Zealand economy, because obviously, most people in New Zealand aren't farmers. I mean, I want to say only maybe about 10% of people that actually live in New Zealand are farmers, but that 10%, or probably even less than that, but that 5 or 10% of people in New Zealand are accounting for most of the, economic growth in New Zealand, and without them, we just really wouldn't survive. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that and share my appreciation, because like I said, most of my family grew up as farmers, and some of them still are farmers. So I grew up just realizing how important farming was for our economy. So I just hope that you can see how important Fonterra as a company is for New Zealand. And so I hope you learned a thing or two from this episode. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments down below. And without further ado, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next episode. Peace out.
Market Talk is a production of TeamTMS. For more episodes of Market Talk just like this one, visit us on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.